we have two stars here, and the afternoon belongs to them. And there are two books which will be released today, written by Acharya and Satya Mohanty. Both of them will be released, and then we'll begin with the discussion. On these two wonderful books, and before that, one more thing, Mr. Siddharth Jain of Suva Arts would like to present mementos to the writers. I invite Mr. Jain. It is often said that bureaucrats speak up only after the retirement. They start criticizing the very same policies which they were responsible for making while they were in service. It's a general feeling. I mean, let me play a devil's advocate here. So is there a grain of truth in this statement or this feeling? The question is to both of you. Yeah, starting with Dr. Mohanty and then I. Or is it that the wisdom suddenly dawns after you turn 60 or 65? Or you are bound by, as we know, service rules and things like that? Please.
Actually, the small resentments so while within the service, but you are law bound not to go out in the open and express it. You are law bound. That's part of your service. So it is not that a deja vu moment comes or you suddenly realize that things were like this, etc. It is always realized while being in the service. But I think you are more free to express it when you go out of the service. So that's the thing. It is not that it is a light bulb moment after you retire. No.
Good afternoon to everyone. It's indeed a great pleasure to be here this afternoon. Mr. Sharma, Dr. Sharma briefly mentioned about this area being developed and all that. In fact, I consider myself distinctly fortunate that this was the first allotment in this area made by in 2008. And little did I realize, I christened the area as the Knowledge City. Little did I realize that my first book will be launched here. So it's a matter of great satisfaction. Coming to your question about the service rules and how are you prepared? For a political cartoonist, it's even more difficult to make comments on bureaucracy or the politicians. So I had to literally do a tightrope walk, but I kept my hobby alive by not giving it up and trying to focus my cartoons on the civil service itself, on the bureaucracy itself, because it did cause a lot of jealousy, a lot of rancor, but I bashed on regardless. So that's how I continued my hobby, which was a childhood hobby, for over 40 years that I was in service. The service rules cease to apply to you, the conduct rules cease to apply to you after retirement, but not entirely. Now there is a rule that if you share some confidential secret, your pension can be stopped. So one has to be careful, even after retirement. So keeping all that in mind, within the framework of the conduct rules, one has to pursue the creativity without hurting too much. That perhaps answers your question.
Where do you draw the line?
Pardon?
I mean, you said without hurting too much, so where do you draw the line?
It's up to you. You have to draw your own line. Where you think is dangerous, where you think it's going to cause problems, you need to be careful.
No, roughly you started, what both of you started some 40 years back, I suppose you started a journey around the same time. Has the situation changed from then to now? Because the forms of expression have also changed. I mean, now even a social media post by a civil servant would be considered an expression of opinion.
Yeah, the ability to remain under the radar is becoming less and less. Earlier, you write an opinion piece, probably it will be read by 2,000 people all over the country, and they'll probably read it and forget about it, or read it after a gap of time. But today, on a real-time basis, whatever is written, that will be commented on. So that is a difference. There is a difference in the worldview. There is a change in the tectonic shift in the way people respond to. And but at the end of it, if you want to express, you will have to express regardless, and you will have to temper your tenor in a manner. But at the same time, you will have to express it. But you will get a little bit of luck too.
You have been writing poetry and plays and different forms of literature. Did that also come in the way? I mean, service roles come in the way of that also? Or only the opinion pieces?
Actually, I describe myself as a old person, but a young writer. Okay, so because while being in the service, I used to write some opinion pieces in economic times and all, but not too many, in the sense like maybe once or twice in a quarter. But so far as the poetry, playwriting, and other things, and novel, etc., is concerned, all these things started post-retirement. So that's why I'm only a 7-year-old writer.
So much of experience. You want to add something?
I'm a little bit luckier than Dr. Mohanty. I call him Satya Bhai. In fact, he was the secretary of the IAS Association when I used to give him cartoons every month to publish in the IAS bulletin. Obviously, they were not directly attacked with the politicians, but he published them. That's how I kept my hobby alive, doing a cartoon a month. But before that, as a probationer in the academy, I used to draw for the Wall Journal, for the Spectrum, which was published there, put up there.
But how did you start? How did your interest start into drawing? You know, were you a born artist, or you had some interest from your childhood? It was a cultivated hobby.
It started rather early. I was barely 10 years old or so. The events around me at that time, the Bangladesh War, the Vietnam War, it attracted a number of cartoons which used to come in the newspapers, and I used to wait for the cartoons to come. Those days, those days, the papers I used to get in the afternoons. So I was in a town in Odisha. It used to come from Calcutta, the Amrit Bazar Patrika and Hindustan Standard. So Shankar and Kuti was the cartoonist in Hindustan Standard, and Amar for Amrit Bazar Patrika. And then there was the Illustrated Weekly of India, where Lakshman used to draw his caricatures in the drawing, and Mario Miranda, of course. These are the 4 top cartoonists, the legends who inspired me as a child, and I copied their cartoons, hundreds of them. That's how I learned my art.
How did your writing journey start?
Yeah, you got the right word. It is always a journey. No one reaches a destination straight. During my college days, I was in great demand because I used to write this one-act plays.
Okay.
Not only in the whole city, not only in my college, but in the whole city, they would like to produce a play. So that's what I dabbled in, and some kind of scale with regard to that thing was there. So during COVID time, I started writing these 3 plays, which is published in a book called Breathless and the other plays. And but if you really look around for it, real skill set was honed while writing those one-act plays. And in the college also, I used to write some poems here and there. So I continue with that. Posted that much.
Otherwise, bureaucrats like you write a lot. I mean, you write notes, you write, different kinds of things. That's different from your other writing. So does that help or is an obstruction?
You see, there is a term for it in English language, officialis.
Yes.
So that language itself is a great dampener for any kind of creative writing. Okay.
It is not to be understood, it's not to be deciphered.
Because you are trying to put it in a template, number one. Number two, you are analyzing, skills of analysis is improving.
Yeah.
But the language is not a great flyer.
It's not supposed to be. Yeah.
Like every government order will have a last paragraph. It says, after careful consideration, after careful examination of the matter, government hereby decides. Whether you will decide, see it carefully or not carefully, it doesn't matter.
So now I come to the two books. Dr. Mohanty's book is titled Unpolitically Correct. Should it be politically incorrect or unpolitically correct? Can you elaborate on that? Why this type?
There is a reason. Politically correct is also correct, but with a caveat emptor. The caveat it is something like a lowest common denominator of correctness. Okay. You avoid things which will offend something, both in action as behavior as well as in words. And politically incorrect is the exact opposite of that, which means that you don't care whether it offends anyone, etc. So this is not the intention of this book, is to be more than politically correct. At the same time, not to be completely politically incorrect, because the intention is not to offend. It is only the data and the facts. I have tried to prove that suboptimal policies that we tend to make.
I'll come to some of those specific issues. And Dr. Acharya, you have called your book Obtuse Angle. It's not a mathematics book. It might be confused. The bookstores might put it in the educational sections. What do you mean?
When I've explained that in the previous first paragraph, normally one tends to see everything with an acute angle, particularly a bureaucrat, in a critical way. I just mentioned the government after critical examination decides. So here I try to look at the funnier side of it, the humorous side of the things, the events around you. That's why obtuse angle. It's not an acute angle from which you see. And I think in everything there's an obtuse angle. That's what my column was called when I started publishing these monthly cartoons in the IAS Bulletin, and it stuck. So I've carried on with that column. After retirement, I'm publishing a regular weekly cartoon column in the Pioneer Daily. It's continued to be called Obtuse Angle. So I stuck to that title.
So now let's discuss a few points about the core issue of your book and also theme of his cartoons is about innovation. I quote a para from your book. It says you've written that at the heart of policy is politics, so much so that in many languages the term for both is the same. The umbilical cord with politics is inevitable, as there is a requirement of legitimation that only politics can provide. Normatively, however, politics in policy making should be a sophisticated amalgam of politics, evidence, and a worldview of welfare, as the cost of failed policy can be significant. I think it's a profound statement you have made. You talk about politics, evidence, and welfare. It's a mix. I mean, it has to be a right mix, so to say. But don't you think that it's been getting skewed in recent times with politics getting an upper hand and evidence getting almost absent? I mean, what do you feel? Now you can say in hindsight, and you have written with a lot of evidence and data in your book, so please elaborate that. Is evidence disappearing from policy making and politics taking upper hand in policy making?
Evidence has always been weak in policy making most of the time. Okay. Largely because there is no feedback loop. And even if there is a feedback, you do not find the policy being abandoned. Okay. There is a lock-in with regard to policy. So that means evidence is coming, but you are not taking correct action, even in the best of times. Yes, it has become skewed to a certain extent. Evidence, probably you caucus look at evidence, number one. Number two, what is worrisome? Your work of welfare. I just returned from Mumbai. Then someone asked the question about a particular thing, about a particular program of Maharashtra government. What has happened is that politics has driven policy away from policy making to direct transactional exchange. Okay, in the sense it is trying to make a very efficient delivery, delivery, quick electoral dividends. That I will not call policy. It is basically very transactional. That I will not call policy. And second thing, what has happened is that your worldview of welfare, maybe people have given a go-by to it to a certain extent. They are not looking at the long term. They are looking at the 5-year term. They are looking at 1-year term, looking at 6 months term, etc. So whether the policy will be sustainable, what are the virtuous effects of the policy, what are the downside of those policy, what are the unintended consequences of those policy, that will get kept under the swept under the carpet and policy done. I will not call them so much as sophisticated policy making, because it is straightforward. You give input, you require output, and the output you want immediately.
On the same theme, the any number.
Process of consultation, as you mentioned, there used to be a time when there would be consultation, even before budget, which is an annual exercise, but even for policy making, there would be consultation. Lots of policies did come out of people's movement also. A lot of policies did come out of other kinds of sources, and they were adopted in the 70s. And there are a number of such examples. So are we moving away from that totally and becoming totally transactional as Mohanty sir said?
More than a policy, I will begin with a cartoon of mine which I do as a professional. One of the earliest cartoons that was put up on the wall journal when I was a trainee in Masuri Academy. It showed Lal Bahadur Shastri trying to enter the LBSNA. They had just introduced what is called a tie regulation. Everyone must wear a tie all the time. So the person there said, you can't enter, you were not wearing a tie. So it did cause a lot of interest among the trainees. The director noticed it and it was relaxed to some extent. That's how a cartoon or a creative piece can change policy. It has the ability to influence, provided you are sensitive. If the policy maker is sensitive to the creative input, the policy can be changed, can be modified. Any number of cartoons you would see in the economic section on budget, where the finance minister is supposed to be cooking the budget biryani. Somebody says, add little more populism masala. So it will be relevant now. The halwa will be cooked.
Halwa, not biryani. You have to be politically correct.
Halwa also is there. But your book is biryani, so that's why your book is on biryani.
But I agree with Vibhu. I was only reading every day R.K. Lakshman's cartoon. I remember one statement of his. He was asked that why he is not making cartoons of the politicians. He said, I am no longer interested in making cartoons out of politicians because the cartoons have become politicians. Okay. So that is one part, and it is true that this art, the picture can say 1,000 words, whereas I will struggle with my 1,000 words. A picture can say 1,000 words, so that way he is lucky. And this cartoon as a art form does a great job. Thank you.
The issues which you have dealt at great length in your book, to Mohanty, is about core areas of policy making and governance are health and education. And you've gone into great details about both health and education, as well as wealth inequality, and you've gone into that in great detail. But these are the precisely two areas, health and education, is where governance and policy making matters, but it has also failed in the sense that a number of public policies have led to the entry of private sector in these two areas, and we have miserably failed, as you have given with data and create a narrative on these two subjects. But still we continue with that, and we are trying to, instead of course correcting, we are trying to project them as examples of good policy making in both health and education. And because if you look at health, the private sector led insurance model, which is the American model of insurance led healthcare. We have got into that trap, and we are slowly moving towards a system where it will be completely insurance led and insurance led in the private sector. So, where do you think we have gone wrong?
I'll start with the second point first. The problem with the insurance is that it comes with both the sides to the bargain. Someone comes with informational advantage, someone comes with informational, what they call it, asymmetric advantage. Then it leads to other things like moral hazard, etc., etc. But that's not the main thing. Main thing, when you come to health insurance, the problem is you stop looking at the other options which are available. And instead, you wash off your guilt by saying that I have given an insurance. And insurance, and my good friend is here, who is a subject matter specialist in health. He is sitting there but very grim. I am not saying anything against you. So, okay. And he says that in private health supply, there is something called supply-induced demand. If you are staying in a housing colony and you will find a big hospital will come there for health care, essentially they are recruiting people for the health procedures to be done in the hospital. And maybe they will have waited 6 months, that will have waited 2 years. But since they have got a doctor to do it and they earn money, they will do it. So country like India, where 80% of people are health insecure, okay, health insecure, insurance is not the way out. Not your PPP model is the way out. Nor you can bank upon private health supply. Okay. So here, what happens is that many of the insurance schemes are going up. You go for a small procedure in the hospital, that 5 lakh is washed off. You have got nothing left. Whereas it is a procedure which could have been handled at 1/5 of the price. So that is why the out-of-pocket expenses in the private hospital is so high, it will devastate a family. So that is precisely why I hold these public goods must be supplied by the government. There is no escape from it, particularly for a country like ours. Not.
No, Acharya, I have a different
I will supplement his point from a humorous angle.
Okay.
In fact, there is a recent cartoon of mine which shows a patient being in the operation theatre. The surgeon is about to start the procedure. Somebody that comes running, saying that stop, the GST has changed on the health insurance. So we need to take, you have to take his signature for that. So, the sector has become so unpredictable. I happen to be as the chairman of the advisory committee in IITA Ombudsman's group. So I happen to see the very close quarters, the way it is handled, particularly during COVID. The companies made a killing. So there's so many complaints which come to the ombudsman because in their anxiety to get into this, otherwise insurance remains at a very rudimentary stage in India, only with 2% penetration. It hasn't grown. Although there is a dream to have 100% penetration, which is very far away. So health insurance particularly has become important after the COVID pandemic. I think what he said is right.
One particular issue which I wanted you to elaborate, Acharya, is that you were one of the key policy makers involved in conceiving and implementing Cyberabad as a technology hub and Genome Valley as a life sciences hub. So 15 years down the line, do you see that everything has gone right, or is some course correction needed, or things have gone totally out of hand, or how do you look at it? You were involved at that time. What did you conceive? How it has come to this stage, and has it been something? Is it the way you conceived it, or you wanted it differently? Because you thought of a new city,
My answer is yes and no. Partially, it has fulfilled the dream of creating what you call a globalized city. Beyond Biryani book, you called it a globalized city. So this is how Hyderabad emerged as a global city without the infrastructure. There was a video viral recently which showed the pilot commenting that is it Dubai or what, and it's looking like some country abroad, this area. But there is a great concern which I feel. When we allotted land here, we never thought that this area will fall prey to greed of the real estate, which it has. I wanted it. It's become a complete jungle, unfortunately. There should be more greenery, there should be more trees all around. And the original idea was it should promote walk to work. The people who work in these software companies, they should be able to walk to their offices, which has not happened. The cost of the housing here has become so expensive. The average software employee cannot afford to buy an apartment or a flat here. It is the CEO, the very top level people who doesn't work here. So the software personnel still commute from Sainikpuri or Uppal every day, leading to the congestion. So that dream was hijacked by the real estate. I wish and pray that some control is introduced to the area left now. This is 425 acres, this right of the so-called Knowledge City, and against 200 acres of the high-tech city area, original software layout. So this has the potential of driving Hyderabad's growth for the next 20 years. So there is a sense of satisfaction, yet there is a sense of dismay.
Is there any cartoon you have made on this subject?
There is something on Hyderabad in general, but not specifically on this.
You have spared this subject, or you spared this subject because...
No, it is not my intention.
One small point. Policies are not conceived, then you can think and get a thought, and that can lead to a policy. But policies have to be crafted. Because it is so multidimensional and it is so multidisciplinary that one odd thought coming in cannot really make a policy. But yes, the seed can be there.
It's a collective thing, it's not just one. So I have one question for each of you, and then we'll open the floor for questions and comments. Dr. Mohanty, you write that my deja vu moment came after the Prime Minister's instruction to all secretaries in 2014. I visited the subdivision where my career started to assess what had changed. That's when things began to unravel before me. Can you elaborate on this, and why is it so?
Yeah.
Are the top bureaucrats, those in the policy making roles in the central government, in the state governments, getting cut off from the ground realities? And did this exercise of sending secretaries go where you started your career? Did it help in any way?
No.
Just a gimmick?
It doesn't happen that way, but this time officially it was made mandatory for the secretaries to the government to go to their first subdivision. That's all. Otherwise, we keep on visiting, etc., but at differential level of attention. I'll tell you why it was a deja vu movement. When I was sub-collector of a subdivision, 2 colleges were inaugurated. In 1982, it was a big thing. Okay. 2 colleges, the building got inaugurated. After 35 years, when I was going there, I found number 1, they don't have any compound. They have got plenty of land, but no compound. Number 2, most horrific thing is there is no physics and mathematics permanent teachers. They are taken on contract. Whereas Sanskrit teacher is a permanent teacher. Okay. Whereas, so to my mind, someone can contest it, saying that Sanskrit is as important as physics or mathematics. But to my mind, I thought, while it is condemnable to have some contract teachers in some other subjects where the migration, where people will move in and out quite frequently, but these are the basics, physics, mathematics, etc. And you can't have a person coming in and giving him 250 rupees or 300 rupees per class. So that is what something surprised me. The second thing which surprised me is the labs not stabilized after 30-35 years. So how did it happen? Are people cut up from the ground level? No. The reason for this is threefold. Number one, people who are the manager of that institution do not articulate the need very well. Okay. Number two, what happens is that most of the funding which goes to the college goes away in salary. Nothing is left for lab purchases, etc., etc., or very little thing is left. So they don't articulate that there should be enhancement. Or maybe it doesn't find resonance in the people who decide that extra money is required. Okay. So these are the things. What is worrisome is this much. Because these are not massive problems, these are solvable problems. It has either not been articulated or it has not resonated in the people to do that extra bit to make it function better.
Would you like to add, or I have another question? I see that your political cartooning has become very old in recent times, recent years, 2, 3, 5 years. You have covered Manipur, you have covered farmers' agitation, you covered Viksit Bharat, Election Commission, Sangol. So you are getting bolder and bolder. Godi media, and it's very fantastic thing when somebody goes to interview the Prime Minister, the chairs are designed like a Godi, so that people who come to interview the Prime Minister feel comfortable. So are we going to see more such stuff, or
hopefully, because
the best is yet to come?
As I mentioned in the beginning, the conduct rules strictly don't apply after retirement, but they do in some ways. As per the latest regulations, you cannot share confidential data, so your pension can still be withheld. We are still pensioners who get money from the government. So that but for that, here one can do any cartoon. So the element of freedom. So I was regularly celebrating the freedom to do cartoons after I retired. So that's when the new cartoons, I started my regular column. It was a godsend opportunity.
Service rules are not amended to
You never know.
this form of expression, because as a journalist, I face this problem that former officials are not ready to talk, because especially ICR, ICMR, they are told specifically, there was a press release that former officials are not going to comment on the pandemic and several other issues. So hope in future cartooning doesn't get covered in that.
Latest danger of being called an anti-national. That remains.
That's an honor. Anyway, so that brings us to end of this discussion. So now the floor is open for questions and brief comments. If you have comment, keep it brief. Yeah, please.
I'd just like to add something to what Mohanty has said about education. He gave the 3 reasons why he saw those colleges behaving in a state of Acharya. And I think there is one very basic fundamental reason that is causing. You talked about policy. The policy makers are all very well educated, the top brains of the country, which have been taken into IAS under great competition. But who do they report to? People who don't even have a single degree. And they have to obey them. As long as the education or policy is in the hands of such people who have no education, please do not even dream that there will be any education in India. The privatization of all the colleges and institutes has resulted in bringing out students who are unemployed. We are running companies. When engineers come out, They know so little that we have to run 6 months courses to teach them engineering after their 5 years. This is a state, sir. I'd like your comments.
Only one caveat here. Education or being educated does help, but conversely, there are instances in this state where people who are not very highly educated, they are the best chief ministers. So what are the ingredients which makes a very good politician? Openness to ideas, respecting the person on the other side who is giving his ideas, giving his suggestions, etc. And little bit of humility that keeps you away from that I know all, or I am in Mount Sinai and whatever flows from me must be followed. So that is the only thing. But education does help. But that is not, it may be a necessary condition but not a sufficient condition. So unless all these three things are there, respect for the people who are advising you, respect for opinions which are coming, and also your हिंदी में क्या बोलते हैं वो नौबत नहीं क्या बोलते हैं and your objective should be must your objective should be primarily good, but you cannot have a different malicious objective and try to dress it by a very good this thing. Okay, very good idea and we must do it. I am doing it for people's welfare. No. जो से बोलते हैं ना उर्दू में बोलते हैं धूल चेहरे पे था और आईना साफ करता है.
Very well said. In fact, it's my personal observation as a journalist that some of the ministers who have been so subject experts, for example, a doctor being a minister or a highly educated person being made education minister, didn't work. They got into too much into their own professional stuff. I mean, that's my observation. So maybe it applies. It's not a one-to-one relationship.
My question is to Mr. Satya Mohanty. You made a statement that policy should be crafted. So both the statement you made on education, the college, and what Mr. Acharya said about this area, how it has developed. So don't you think that when you're crafting this policy, you have to foresee? I mean, you had to have foreseen that real estate is going to grow here. You had to have foreseen that traffic is going to increase, drainage, rainwater. How come these things were not thought of? And now when we find that this has developed so much, this area, so any policy when you say crafting, obviously you have to think 50 years, 100 years ahead. How is it that this has not happened in not just this so many areas?
Okay. Ordinarily, what I said normatively should be done, but sometimes what happens is that the political bosses want it on a yesterday basis. Okay. To that extent, it gets compromised to a certain extent. Because no one will give you 1 year to craft it. They will give you within 3 months you finish it and come back. So naturally, you didn't have the chance to bounce it into hundreds of fellows and get the idea, etc. I know during the time of the plan discussion, how much of discussion is to go on. Okay, it had its strength. Okay, so but the point is, anything that you do in a rush, many things you forget in a rush. Okay, and but it is true, the unintended consequence part of it, in every policy one should look at. Or eventually who will be the gainer and who will be the loser, who will be the winner, who will be the loser. That must be put in the template to understand what it implies. But that said, I must also concede something to the uncertainty. We live in an uncertain world where this particular place was being built. No one thought that it will get filled in 10 years or 15 years time. Okay. Many people thought that it may not happen. These are all hallucinations. Okay. Many people thought. So naturally, to that extent, the uncertainty principle might have affected also. Okay. I hope I have answered your question.
I will try to partially answer Madam's question. Mrs. Bhavana, she's a senior IPS officer. It is not always possible to foresee all the future requirements. In fact, Dr. Sharma's book brings out this fact beyond biryani. It brings out the fact how the Musi floods of the 1908 changed the whole way of thinking for Hyderabad. The same thing applies here. The high-tech city, the cyber tower was built in 1996. It got inaugurated. It started. But till about 2004-05, there was no sewerage line. All the sewerage used to go into, get into the Durgam Cheru. So the rush to build something, to show results to the public without going to the soft issues, the hard issues that is escaped in policy making, and in an anxiety to achieve results fast, it is often given a go-by, which it should not be, but you have to adjust, make a compromise here and there.
Policymakers remain, the politicians go away. So
On the contrary, there are policymakers who thought way beyond. When they go outer ring road with the plan, somebody said 8 lane is enough, 6 lane is enough. We then chief minister had the vision to say, no, it is not enough. You should have 8 lane. 4 lane plus actually 12 lane road with service roads on both sides. You should have the metro line all around. That's how Novara became what it is today. Very few cities can boast of an infrastructure like this.
This is Dr. Chakravarti, former civil servant, retired 30 years ago. Maybe I am the oldest in the audience here. One issue which was raised very correctly and relevantly is the politician versus bureaucrat. Now, there is a presumption that the bureaucrats having come through a very difficult competitive examination and perhaps number of degrees behind one's name, he is knows all. And a politician, if he is illiterate, he may not know anything. None of these two presumptions are correct. Even if you have a number of degrees beyond your name, you will not be in a position to take appropriate decisions in the interest of the public. There could be a lot of difference. It could be elite and it could be elitist policy which do not agree with the country's philosophy. Whereas if you take a politician, I got a personal experience of one chief minister to whom I took a project. There are 7 arguments they gave in support. And then I looked at him and he had an 8th point. That was something which there was more on me in the sense that they have a lot of common sense. If common sense is also applied, it would make a tremendous difference. It is not that your bureaucrat also takes the approved decision. Right now, I'll make one further point of view. We have got artificial intelligence coming into the picture as far as decision making is concerned, informed decision making. Yes, it is true. AI has got some good phases, it has also some bad phases. What's important is, if in management, as Acharya Mohanty would say, the e-governance and all that, if you have AI to support you and use it as a tool, it can give you a forward movement towards informed decisions. At least that we should hereafter concentrate on. I would like your thoughts, Acharya and Mohanty, on this.
Because the time is short, I'll give a very crisp reply.
30 seconds.
Yes. Like the TV debate. So, if you have a stupid man deciding, even the smartest AI will fail. Depends on the person who decides, who uses the AI. AI by itself won't solve the problem. I think since the time is short, I need to end.
One last question and then we end. Brief, please be brief.
Good afternoon. What is your opinion on bureaucrats and judges taking up post-retirement jobs like governors, becoming Human Rights Commission chairmen, becoming Rajya Sabha members? What is your opinion on that? How do you differentiate?
It's a politically incorrect question, but I would like to reply to comment.
Well, this is legit. This is absolutely legal. What do I say about that? If the law says that the Supreme Court Chief Justice post-retirement can be considered for the National Human Rights Commission chairperson, it's legit. But if you are asking an overarching picture, people getting rewarded for whatever they did during their service period, then that's a different question. But I guess that is not your question. Okay.
Yeah. So, so with that point, we'll end the discussion today. Thank you for being such a patient audience. We'll take it offline if you don't want, because the next session is to begin. And both the books are available at the festival bookstore. Please buy, and both the authors are here, so you can get them signed.
I will make a small seek my indulgence of so many friends over it. I wish I could give copies to everyone, but unfortunately, I got barely enough for the release. They just arrived from Kolkata. The book release happened in a month's time. It's a miracle. So, of course, more books are available at this stall. I would try and give it later personally to each one of you. My thanks for all of you to taking the pains to attend this.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.